Welcome back, everyone. For today's video, we are going to be taking a look at the 11th and final round of the Grand Swiss, which is being held here in the Isle of Man, which is a dependency of the Crown, also known as the United Kingdom. Now, going into this final round, we have a very interesting situation. There are three players who are tied for the lead, all on 7.5 points. Myself, Vidit Santosh Gujarati, and of course, Andrei Yasipenko. Now, all three of us have the same amount of points, but we are all playing players with less points. Yasipenko playing Giri, who's 1 point less, Vidit playing Predka, who's half point less, and I'm playing Arjun Erigaisi, who also is a half point behind me. So, in this final round, the situation is very clear. If I draw or win, I'm almost certainly going to qualify for the cans, either through finishing top 2 in the tournament or by rating. So I'm playing Arjun, and the game starts with e4, and of course I decide to play the Sicilian with c5. Now, one thing that I said during my interview on my Kick channel is I think a lot of players misunderstand my general philosophy towards chess these days, which is that I try to play interesting chess no matter what the situation is. Now, traditional chess people would tell me that in the last round game where you're leading the tournament, you should be rock solid. Do not lose. Now, the thing is, normally you would play e5 and play something like a Spanish, maybe an Italian, etc. But in a situation like this where my opponent must win the game to qualify for the candidates, why do I want to allow him many opportunities to go for gambits? First of all, he could play the King's Gambit. He could also play something like the Goring Gambit or the Danish. He could also play the Max Lang attack. He could also, of course, play something like an Evans Gambit as well as b4. And with all these various gambits, why do I want to allow that? And furthermore, I also have been preparing the Sicilian for a very long time, so why not use it? So Arjun goes knight to f3, I play knight c6, we get d4, takes, and now I play e5, resorting to one of my favorite systems, which of course is the Kalashnikov variation of the Sicilian. Arjun plays knight b5, I go d6, he goes knight to a3, trying to play knight c4. Now, normally this position occurs after knight c3, a6, and knight a3, but it is the same thing, where after a6, knight c3, both of these knights are on these two squares. So, in this position, I play bishop to e6, Arjun plays knight c4, and now I play this move knight to f6. All the way back in, I think, March or April in the American Cup, when I first sprung the surprise against Lenier Dominguez from the United States, I played the move rook to b8, and after knight d5, I won a very long and tactical skirmish. Now, of course, Arjun surely was ready for this rook b8 line, so instead I decided to play knight to f6 instead. We get a4, and now I play rook c8. Now, all this is very standard thus far. This has been known, and I think for Arjun, perhaps he was a little bit surprised that I had another line set in stone. Now, to be very clear for anyone who's wondering, I've actually had this line prepared pretty much ever since the American Cup, so I've been waiting to use this variation or the specific surprise for about 7 months now. So bishop g5 gets played, I go knight b4, and this is one of the drawbacks to white playing a4. Initially, Arjun played a4 to stop me from playing b5 to harass the knight on c4, but when you play a4, now you give me a juicy square on b4 for my horse. Arjun plays knight to e3. Now, already here, the flow of the game is very important, and for Arjun, he's burning up a lot of time very early. As you can tell, he's already used over 20 plus minutes. So I play bishop e7, and of course for me, I'm bing chilling here. I'm just moving instantly. This is all my preparation, and I'm feeling very good. We get bishop to e2. I play knight g4 here. Again, this has been seen in correspondence games before, and of course I have reviewed this line very recently. So Arjun plays bishop takes knight, which is perhaps a little bit dubious. Computer wants bishop takes bishop here, and after knight takes knight, attacking the queen, bishop takes queen, knight takes queen, rook takes knight, rook takes rook. After rook d2 or king d2, white is a little bit worse, but he should be able to draw. However, for my opponent Arjun, this has to be the worst possible situation to find yourself in, because of course I'm blitzing every single move instantly. Secondarily, he's in a must-win situation. So in a must-win situation with white, where he's expecting an open Sicilian, something aggressive, he's basically playing against Stonkfish. So he plays bishop g4, I take, and again, all these moves I'm playing pretty much instantly until this situation where I play queen f6. Now, in this position, Arjun, I think, initially thought queen f6 was probably not playable due to this pin on this diagonal. It looks like white can play knight ed5 here, because if you take the knight with the pawn, you lose the rook and you lose the game. And after knight takes here, for example, after e takes d5, the pawn on e6 is weak, and white also has a jumbo square for the horse on e4. So in this position, Arjun probably thought he could play knight d5, but I actually have a nice tactical solution. I can play queen g6 here, sidestepping the fork, and if white takes the free horse, we have the classic fossil with bishop d2, checking the king, and after king takes bishop, queen takes queen. He has D's knights for a queen, but the queen is better than D's knights. So Arjun decides to castle, and now I decide to castle as well, and he plays this move rook a d1. Now you can see from the clocks here that I've used about 9 minutes, and Arjun has used about an hour 10. So Arjun's used a lot of, or not an hour 10, sorry, an hour 3, hour 4, but Arjun has used a lot of time here, and I basically used no time, and I could sense the je ne sais quoi, once again to use the phrase, where I could sense there was something here that should be very good for me, but I couldn't work it out. On top of that, you have to keep in mind that the situation does matter a lot. Now, at this point in the game, I could already tell that Anish Giri was doing very well against Andrei Yesipenko, and for that reason, I knew that I should try to not take some massive risk unless I saw a clear-cut way to win the game. So here, there were a couple moves that I considered. I considered queen to h6 as well as knight to c6. Knight c6 is probably the move that I would have liked to have played in retrospect, because here, if white plays the move knight c4, after knight to d4, I have this jumbo horse in the center, and after knight takes d6, I can play this move rook c7, and now his horse is kind of stuck. You don't really have many squares available for this knight, and white is in a lot of trouble here. Computer says king h1 is a move because if you try to play rook d8, maybe there's some idea like knight to e2, and after rook takes, there's some c3 idea to undermine the horse. Again, would this have happened? I'm very doubtful, or I'm very skeptical. But the problem is during the game, the only line I saw was rook c6, knight takes b7, and now white has won 2 pawns on the queen side, and he wants to go knight a5 and knight b3 to challenge the knight. And if I don't have a knockout blow, I've just sacrificed 2 pawns for nothing, and I probably will lose the game. So, if I could do it again, I probably would have played knight c6, but again, it's based on seeing this rook c7 move because I am sacrificing material. At the end of the day, I decided to be more solid, playing queen to e7, and now the queen guards both of these pawns on e6 and d6. Arjun plays queen to e2 because I am threatening, for example, just take on e3 and then take the free pawn on c2. So he goes queen to e2 back to guard c2. I play knight c6 here, and this is a move that I also am not happy with. When I played knight c6, I spent a lot of time, and this whole sequence over the next couple of moves was based on a pure miscalculation. Arjun plays queen d3, I go knight d4, and now he plays this move knight e2. Initially, I thought that if Arjun were to play this move knight c4, I could actually win the game by sacking the rook with rook to f3, but computer says after pawn takes rook bishop f4, threatening to mate, white can go h3, and black has nothing better here than to simply force a repetition. So, Arjun plays knight e2, I take the knight, he takes my bishop, I trade the rooks, and now I go knight c6. Now, all the way back when I played knight d4, I saw this line, and my initial intention was to play knight takes c2, because I thought after rook c1, there's queen c7, and it looks scary due to this pin, but black is actually completely fine here because I can play queen c4 here, I can go queen c5 as well, and white will never be able to win the horse, and if white goes knight c3, I retreat with my horse back to b4 and c6. So, if I were to play knight c2 here, the thing that I realized pretty much as soon as Arjun played knight e2 is that there's this move queen b3, cutting off the b4 square. He also guards the e3 pawn, and the knight is very bad on c2. If I play a move like rook c6, there's rook to c1. The only way to guard the knight is with queen c7, but now I lose the pawn on e6, and I'm slightly worse. So I play knight c6. It's not a move that I wanted to play, but nonetheless, due to the pawn structure with white having these double pawns on e4 and e3, I should still be slightly better with no risk at all, which is exactly what you want in the situation. So Arjun plays queen d2 to stop me from going knight a5 or knight b4. If I could get this knight to a5 and c4, it could be a serious problem for white, but queen d2 takes away both of the squares. So I go rook d8, Arjun plays queen c3, I play queen c7, and now he plays this move rook to d1. Now the big question for me in this game is what am I doing here? Now I could sense that I'm a little bit better, but I wasn't sure how to proceed. On the one hand, I can play d5 to try and build the big black center, but now the pawns become a little bit loose. White can play queen b3, there's also b5, and it's not clear how good the center actually is. So I end up playing the move queen to b6 instead, trying to create the classic right triangle, attacking both of the pawns on b2 and e3. Arjun plays the move rook to d3, guarding the pawn on e3, and now I play the move queen to b4. Now, queen b4 is not the best move. What I should have actually done here is I should have followed the advice of one of the fans yesterday who actually asked me after I won my game, would I play the bomb cloud today? Now, of course, my obvious answer was probably not. But in this game, what I should have done is drawn some inspiration from that question because everything obviously happens for a reason in life, and I should have gone for Le Bon Cloud with King F7 and King E7 to guard my central pawn. And the reason I should have done this is that white cannot actually move the queen here to say E1 because he loses the pawn on B2 and probably the game. So because the queen can't move, I can bring this king closer to the center, and on the next turn or two, I can probably get away with queen B4, and now my king is a little bit closer to the center of the board. Instead, I go for queen b4 right away, and the reason is simple. Queens will come off the board, will be in an endgame, and I should have zero risk of losing and probably some small chances of winning the game. So Arjun trades the queens. He goes rook c3, trying to create the classic kebab on the 7th rank, and now I play the move knight c6. Here, Arjun goes knight c1, a very important move, because Arjun realizes that he's got the rook on the c file. He wants to start pushing p and try to infiltrate. So I go king f8, knight d3, king e8, and now he plays b4. The knight guards the pawn, and Arjun definitely in the mood for some kebabs with b5 and rook c7. So here I go rook c8, and Arjun plays this move a5. Now, rook c8 is a very serious mistake here. What I should have played was this move a5. And the reason I should have played this move a5 is so that white can never get these pawns marching. Now, all the way back here, initially in this position, I thought I could go king d7, I'd be fine. But the problem is white can go rook b3 with the idea of c4 and c5. So basically, if white can get c4 and c5 in here, white is better because the knight is hitting both the e5 pawn, but also it can jump to c5 and create a lot of forks as well. So if white can get c4, c5 in, white will be better. What I should have done here, however, is I should have probably played this move a5, and the reason is because now white won't be able to push the pawns together. If white goes b5 and we get knight e7, let's say we get something like rook b3, rook c8, now the pawn doesn't get to c4 or c5, and after c3, rook c4, I create my own kebab on the 4th rank, and I will win material. So I should have played a5, and actually when I played rook c8 here, I simply missed that this move a5 was playable here from Arjun fixing the structure. Now, the reason this is so bad is that now white always has the possibility of moving the rook and playing c4 and c5, and I can't undermine this pawn chain on b4 and a5. So from a general standpoint, it was very, very, very bad decision. Now, also, I might add that at this point, I seriously considered offering Arjun a draw with my 30th move because you're not allowed to make a draw before move 30. But I knew I was better, and I saw that Anish had a close to winning position against Andrei Yesipenko, but he hadn't won the game. So for that reason, in my mind, I wasn't sure whether to offer a draw or not offer a draw. And I think I kind of let that get into my mind a little bit too much because once I allowed a5 here, now I think black can only be marginally better. And if you're not careful, I think white can even get the advantage. So I played king d7. Arjun plays king to f1, and now I play the move rook b8. Now, at this point, I have to do something about these pawns as quickly as possible. So I go rook b8, we get king e2, and now I play b6, trying to trade off the pawns on the queen side. Arjun trades, and he goes rook to b3, and now I have to play d5, because if white can get c4 in, now white might have a slight advantage. He has ideas like c5 or b5, maybe rook a3 as well, and white, if anybody, is pressing for the win. So I go d5, it cuts off c4. It also forces white to do something in the center of the board here, and I always have this a5 lever. So here Arjun plays c3. Now I go king to d6, a very important move, and Arjun plays rook a3. Now the last chance maybe for Arjun to try and keep the game going was to maybe trade the pawns and play something like knight to c5 here, but after d4 basically breaking up the white pawn chain, the game probably peters out to a draw, something like this, and now I can even take the pawn on b4. So as long as I get d4 and I can undermine this chain of 2, all the pawns will be traded off, and I should be in no danger. So Arjun plays rook a3 instead, and now after a5, he takes the pawn on a5, he offers me a draw, and I gladly accept it. The game would have concluded after rook to a6. Let's just say takes, takes. White can play something like e4, takes, takes, takes. Probably something like takes, takes, and knight f2 here. And both sides have a knight and 3 pawns here, and this game should eventually end in a draw. So Arjun offers me the draw, I take the draw, and you probably wonder, what does that mean? Well, in the other games, Vidit Santos Gujarati won his game against Alexander Predko, which means that he wins the tournament overall. He gets 8.5 points out of 11, in spite of losing in the first round game, and he gets clear first and $80,000. However, on the third board, with Andrei Yesipenko losing to Anish Giri, and Anish being a full point behind me going into this round, with my draw, I ensure that I get clear second place and $60,000, but more importantly, this means that I automatically qualify to the FIDE Candidates Tournament, which will be held in Toronto in March of next year. and I will be one of the Elite 8. So I automatically qualify with my result here, finishing the top 2 in the Grand Swiss, which is very nice, rather than having to wait and see if I qualify by rating. So I finished second place, I qualify for the candidates, so it's all very, very good news. Now, of course, I have not been thinking about the candidates at all. This is the sort of the first real thoughts that I've had about it. Certainly, it's going to be fun to be back there once again. I came very close last time around. This will be my third candidates tournament, and I'm really looking forward to it. I'll figure out what my team's going to be, how I'll go about it. But at any rate, that is going to be down the road. So on that note, I hope you guys have enjoyed this video, enjoyed all the recaps from this very, very long event, the Grand Swiss being held here in the Isle of Man. If you have not already subscribed to the channel, make sure to smash that subscribe button below. And I will be back pretty soon once I'm back across the pond, as they like to say here in the United Kingdom. Once I'm back across the pond, I'll be back doing recaps, everything else. So I hope you guys have enjoyed all the great content here from